Hello, and welcome to the complete guide to the human design system, and we have part 11 today. And we're going to continue on our adventure into going deep down beneath the surface. I remember as a kid reading Jules Verne's Journey to the Center of the Earth. It's what it feels like sometimes. You know, you go deep down inside and you're always really surprised what is there. I think the thing that is so beautiful about the process is that we have a tendency to see everything within the context of the illusion that we live in. That is, we see things within the context of our lives, and we see things within the way in which we're conditioned on the mental plane, the way we look at things, the way we examine things in this life. We take it for granted, in a sense, what we are as a creature, the way we operate as a creature. The not-self, the homogenized world, has a certain way of seeing itself. What is so fascinating for me in looking into the substructure is recognizing that at this very, very deep level is the actual design, if you will, of all of it. I mean, of all of it. Not something that, in a sense, emerged on the surface and created itself on the surface, but something that was distinctly designed from the bottom up, as it were, and something that it's always, in that sense, being maintained from the bottom up. The story of the crystals of consciousness, it's where we started when we began our mystical journey at the very beginning of this program. The crystals of consciousness are something that are really extraordinary. And for me, in illustrating to you the way in which the crystal of consciousness interacts with the neutrino ocean, one of the things to really grasp about this is that this crystal, that is the inside of the crystal, I don't know how else to describe that, the inside of it, it is this inside of it that carries with it the magic that actually differentiates me from you, from all the other incarnated forces that have ever been in existence. It is the inside that does this. This inside that we refer to in that sense as tone. This is what makes everything different. I mean, the crystals of consciousness are about filtering. They are filtering mechanisms. And I guess in a kind of, metaphoric way, you can sort of think of them in the same way we think of snowflakes. That is, crystalline structures that are inherently unique. That is, every single one of these crystals of consciousness have what is a unique configuration in terms of the way in which they are constructed on the inside. And it is that inside that changes everything. I mean, let me return to the illustration that I began with when we were beginning this process yesterday. And if you take a look at this illustration, you can see very clearly that we have an entry and an exit frequency, that is the base and the color that's at either end. But neither one of them in that sense carries what is the essential information that will construct what is our illusion. They each have their responsibilities, yet it is tone, that is, it is within the crystal itself that the very uniqueness of us as a creature is there. And what is it? It's cognition. I like this word, to be cognitive. I mean, this is what the inner architecture, because this is what we are looking at. We are looking at the inner architecture of the crystal, and what the inner architecture of the crystal produces, well, in essence, is us. That is, it lays out the blueprint of what we are. Again, it's one of these things about the graphic presentations of elements of substructure. As I mentioned yesterday, base is something that is always seen as a square with a point in the center. When you're looking at tone, you're always looking at a triangle, and you're looking at a triangle that has exactly the same dimensions in that sense as the triangle of the Rave body graph. In other words, when you're looking at tone, you're looking in microcosm at the architecture of what is possible on the surface. Now remember, I'm saying what is possible on the surface. It's like, you have a dream. That you want to build something, and you have this vision, and you lay out the architectural plans for it. There's a long way between the drawing of the plan and the realization of it. And this is something really to understand about us. We have a plan inside. That is, it is a cognitive plan. It's not about the plan that says, that your body's going to look like this, or it's going to look like that, or whatever the case may be. It's much more profound than that. It is the way in which you are going to operate potentially as a self-reflected consciousness, as a consciousness in form. And so what's being laid out there is the plan itself, the architecture, if you will, of what's possible for you as a cognitive being. Now think about the whole movement of the information. I mean, look at the graphic and see it. There's a whole movement of information. It begins with this entry point of the base that establishes the parameters upon which the Maya is going to be built. But this is the general Maya. It's not the personal Maya. This is the personal Maya. Here is the general Maya. The base establishes the general Maya. And then there is this movement through the crystal. And here the unique Maya, the potential of the unique being, is established. And it is the potential of the unique being from the aspect of whether that is going to be design or that is going to be personality. What we'll see tomorrow when we get there is what color does. Because it is color that takes the information of base, takes the information of the architecture of tone, and transfers that information so that it can be, emits that information so that it can be captured by the magnetic monopole, and the illusion that is us is suddenly held together. But tone? Tone is the mystery. Tone is the secret. Tone is where everything is. Tone is the answer to the question, why? And it doesn't matter, what context you want to put that question in, why this, why that, why the other thing. The answer is the same. Anything having to do with the Maya that we live in, the answer comes back the same. It's in the tone. It's in the architecture. It's in the architecture of both the design, and it's in the architecture of the personality. And the way they come together in what is variable, the way they come together in that union that is the illusion that us, this is where all the potential is, the potential of the brain. On the design side, the architecture is going to show you the potential of the brain. It's going to show you not simply the potential of the brain, but through that architecture, keys that are there in the knowledge that are going to allow you how to look after that infrastructure properly. It's there in the tone. When you get to the tone on the personality side, you are looking at the architecture of the conceptualizing process, the way in which the sensory system is intended to operate, the way it's intended to operate for you as a differentiated being, as somebody who's different. You see, within us are all these plans. The kinds of dreams you have when you're starting off on an adventure. Inside of us are all these plans. They're there. They're really there. They're engraved in our genetic code. They're there. But they, in and of themselves, mean nothing more than that. They're there. Just as all our receptors are there that attract us to what we are not. It's all there. It's simply a matter of how you're going to live your life, how you're going to live this process. It always comes back to the same thing. In order for you to gain access to your tonal architecture, to what's really there in the plan for you. Not what's been layered over the surface and layered over the surface until there is no you. This is about being able to see what that is. But tone does something else. Tone is really remarkable. in so many ways, it defines the science of human differentiation. Because the science of human differentiation, if you get right down to its core, is based on one thing. It is based on the mutation of the visual cortex and the emergence in 1781 of leftness and rightness. Leftness and rightness. This is the most important contribution that tone makes. Because in understanding the nature of tone, tone is what influences us, either to the strategic, active leftness or to the receptive, passive rightness. You see, we are a nine-centered being. As a nine-centered being, we are different. We are different from our predecessors. The seven-centered being, the being that dominated the planet until 1781, this being was purely left, purely strategic. Everything about the way in which the world developed, everything about the way in which we climbed to the top, everything about the way in which we treat the world around us and we treat each other is all rooted in that strategicness, that pure leftness. But we are an interregnum, that is, we are a form that is a transitional form that's here to take us from the seven-centered being to an 11-centered being that will never exist. But that's another story. What we are is that we are in the transition, and in the transition in this nine, we have remnants of the left, and we have possibilities of the right, and they are built into us, and they are there in the plan, and we have the capacity to be able to access these differences and fulfill the potential they bring us. And all of this can be seen through the function of tone. It's tone that establishes whether something is to the left or something is to the right. It is the architecture that determines it. And this makes an enormous difference. It makes an enormous difference in understanding our nature. Let me give you an example so that you understand what tone brings. Let's look at the rave psychological side of this and think about it for a moment. We have two kinds of minds that people are conscious of. Remember, your personality is who you think you are. So who you think you are, we think of ourselves, in a sense, in two possible ways. In other words, we can process information in two possible ways as a personality consciousness. The most familiar way, the most consistent way, the way in which everybody is conditioned, the way you're taught by your parents, the way you're taught at school, the way everything works for you, is that you're taught to be strategic because that's our history. What does it mean to have a strategic mind? A strategic mind is a mind that is based on the binocular capacity of vision. In other words, an ability that arose in us when we became erect creatures, when our eyes moved literally in their evolutionary process from the side of the skull to the front of the skull. This binocular vision that was developed allowed us to be able to focus and create a three-dimensional world. In creating a three-dimensional world around a focus, our ability to create strategies. Early human beings that were neither very fast, very strong, they were able to conquer their environment because of their strategic capacity to be able to see the environment in an unusual way and to be able to share that awareness with another member of their species. Strategy arose out of that. The strategy that allowed these weak, slow creatures to be able to dominate much more powerful creatures on this plane. That's the strategic root. I'm not suggesting that if you're left-minded today, you're that. But oh boy, is there a relationship to it. I know. I have a strategic mind. After all, I'm Mr. Strategy and Authority, aren't I? I have a strategic mind. It's the way that it works. But you see, since 1781, half of the human beings coming into the world do not have a strategic mind. They don't. They don't. And there's a mutation that took place. It's a mutation that took place in the visual cortex of the neocortex. That mutation that took place, that mutation that in essence took place in what is called the Ajna binary, and I'll show you that in a few moments. This mutation that took place transformed the way in which the brain assembled visual stimuli, and ultimately the way in which the brain itself was going to operate. One of the tenets of human design is that we are in a deeply mutative process, and that in 2027 we're going to see the emergence of solar plex awareness, the beginning of the emergence of solar plex awareness, the completion of the awareness program in this particular vehicle. We already know scientifically that the solar plex center has enormous neural activity. As a matter of fact, more neural activity than the actual brain in a human being. So we know that there are things that are going on. This mutation that took place in the visual cortex is a mutation that changes the way in which information is going to be translated. Think about it this way. If you're left-oriented and you see something, you see somebody in a crowd, this is the way you work. You have a strategic view. You're always looking for a focus. So what you end up focusing on is you end up focusing on a certain thing. Let's say it is a certain person. And because there is a single line of focus, it is possible for you to bring that focus back in and store that as a memory, and that becomes the memory that is the key to the whole background environment. That's being left. Now, if you're right, and you're watching a crowd, you're not seeing anything in particular, because there is no focus. The right visual approach is peripheral. Rather than looking for something and honing in on it, it is simply opened up and it's taking it all in. That's something very different. For example, I have students. And I have students that are candidates to be practitioners and psychologists, and they take very complex tests and examinations and research projects and all of these things. And one of the most consistent pieces of advice that I give them is to take a different approach whether they are left or right. As an example, if you're somebody that has a left personality, a left sun-earth, somebody who has a left personality, they need to study. But what they need to study is only what they're weak at, not to study everything. It would bore them to death, But because they're a focused person, they focus on certain things and not others. So they have weak points in their knowledge, and they need to be objective enough to be able to see, I don't know that very well, I'm going to focus on that to make sure that I have that material. That's being left. If you're right, your process in preparation for an examination starts in the very first class you take. Because you see, if you're right, you're not here to study. That's not what you do. You're not a focused being. You can't go looking for something. You're a resource. You're a resource. And when you're at your very best is when you take things in with full attention. In other words, one of my children is right in terms of their personality mind. And, I have told them, and they don't study. What I have told them always is simply pay attention in class. You pay attention in class, you'll do extremely well. He graduated at the top of his class. It's just a different way. And of course, unfortunately, most children on this planet who are born right, remember, half of all the children coming into the world are born right. That is, born with a right mind, a right personality, right sun, earth. That these children, unfortunately, are being placed under enormous psychological pressure and feel quite inadequate. They don't feel that they really have a grasp of things because that's not the way their mind works, but they're told it should be working that way. The person that is left always seems to have a grasp of their memory. They always have the ability to go back along that focused line. But then again, everything around it is fuzzy and sort of lost. The right person needs to have it brought out of them. Because if you ask them the question, the answer will be there. But they're not going to know what the answer is by themselves in not looking for the question themselves, because that's not the way they work. They're just receptive. They take things in. They are the precursor of a great change that is coming in the way in which we relate. The evolutionary track that we're moving towards, and I've already been through that with you. This rightness leads to a complete surrender, to just simply being taken in a sense. But what we are here in the nine-centered being is that we are this unusual Homo sapien in transitus. We've got all this stuff inside of us. And because we have the map, and I guess it's time for you to see the map, so I put up the illustration now of the tonal structure, is that because we have the map, we have a way of working with this. One of the main themes that I am introducing this year to the general human design public is variable. And variable provides the keys for transformation, these 4 keys for transformation. Each of the keys for transformation arise out of 4 different calculations. That is, it arises out of the design Sun-Earth, the design North and South node, the personality North and South node, the personality Sun-Earth. Those 4 elements in the design, these elements are impacted directly by tone. In other words, these are elements that can be drawn to the left or to the right by the influence of the architecture underneath. And it is these 4 elements that represent the 4 stages of transformation. In other words, tone and your approach to transformation, that they are deeply connected to each other. The way in which transformation opens up for you is going to be written in the architecture of the tone. This is where it all is. This is why tone is something that is so special. And let me take you through the illustration to begin with, because there's a lot of complexities in that. And I'm going to keep this very simple. After all, it is an overview. You can see that this triangle, by the way, the basic triangle that is graphically presented as tone, you can see that the triangle is divided in half. That is, it is divided to a left side and it is divided to the right side. The other thing that you're going to notice is that there are 6 tones. There are 6 tones. There are 5 bases, 6 tones, 6 colors, 6 lines. So here you're looking at, the way in which the 6 tones are laid out in this particular triangular graphic. And what you'll notice about them is that they are grouped in binaries. Now, of course, if you understand the nature of the relationship between the hexagram and the genetic code, this is something to see that this building up of the binaries in the architecture underneath, is the way in which all of the surface mechanics operate, including the way in which hexagram is going to operate. I mean, most people see hexagram, as trigrams. I have always looked at hexagrams 3 ways. And the most basic way is to see a hexagram through its binaries, because this is the way in which one would look at them genetically and the way in which the codons themselves, those codons are constructed. So when you're looking at tonal architecture, remember, everybody who's ever learned human design has learned human design from the top down. And it's important to shake that a bit and try to see that everything takes place from the bottom up. From the bottom up, it is the tone that leads to the color, that leads to the line, that leads to the gate, and so forth and so on. The actual point where an activation is, your Mars, your Jupiter, whatever, is the actual position of the base. It's out of that particular base, in that particular tone, in that particular color, in that particular line, in that particular gate. It's from the bottom up. The architecture is pushing upwards. It's trying to grow. It's trying to find its life on the surface. So the first thing to notice is that it is built on binaries, and the binaries have names that you can relate to. They have names that you can relate to because, of course, this is the architecture of the surface and it mirrors it. We have the splenic binary on the lower left, tone 1 and 2. We have the ajna binary at the top of the triangle, tone 3 and 4. And then we have the solar plex binary at the lower right. And of course, this solar plex binary is the 5 and the 6 tones. In other words, we have a construct here that both indicates the underlying potential of the cognition of a being and the way that cognition is going to be wired through the 3 potential awareness centers, splenic, ajna, and solar plex. In other words, it's all there underneath. It's where the movie is. What's beautiful about the tonal architecture is that it's not just personal architecture, but it's the architecture that aligns you to whatever our particular form principle happens to be and the way in which that form principle needs to operate. Okay, so let's take a look at something and see something right away. This triangle, the way it gets split down the center. Think about that. What you have on one side is you got 1, 2, 3. In other words, the ajna binary gets split in half. And it is the ajna binary, remember I told you that the mutation took place here in the visual cortex of the neocortex. This is the ajna center in terms of the language of design. It is here in the ajna center that the mutation takes place. It's here in the ajna center that you get this division that divides the architecture into its 2 sides. And that the moment that you go from the left side to the right side, you have this transition that takes place from the strategic active, the active body, the strategic left mind, to the other side, the passive right body, the receptive right mind. In other words, you have these divisions that are established. So think about the left, the strategic. Where is it rooted? 2/3 of it is in the splenic binary. And of course, the moment that you're looking at the splenic binary, the moment that you're looking at the whole nature of the spleen, what you're going to get when you get to the surface and you see the splenic center in yourself, the immune system, the well-being, all of that is in the architecture underneath. It is the tonal architecture that creates this. It is the splenic binary that establishes the ability to be intelligent to survive. Oh, this is something that is really incredible. You know, the splenic center is about fear. And the fear of any form is death. Fear for any form is any threat to the potential of their survival. At the deepest level in our architecture, when we begin at the level of the splenic binary, we are dealing with the core intelligence to deal with and be inspired by the fear. Inspired by it. You know, fear is the mother of intelligence. This is the way it works, and you can see it here in the tonal binary. And the first thing that you see in this binary when you're looking at the very first tone, you know, is that you're looking at something that is extremely basic. Extremely basic. It's being aware of anything that's a threat, you know. And it leads to many things. I mean, it leads to many things. It leads to the fundamental basic need of intelligence to have a secure foundation. It will lead to science. It will lead to all kinds of things. It will lead to our sensors that we create and our ability to be able to see all the things that are around us that can threaten us. You know, this is the foundation of being left, is being alert, splenic alertness to what may be a threat. It's in the architecture. And you see, if you bring it to a personal level, you know, this is somebody, if this is somebody that has this on the design side, for example, they have an incredible sense of smell. And that sense of smell is only going to be of value to them, is only going to be the thing that's going to protect them only if they have access to it. You see, the thing about tone is that the plans are there, but do you have access to them? Do you? You know, most human beings are built rather haphazardly on their architecture. I mean, rather haphazardly. The homogenized not-self with their dysfunctional bodies and their diseases and their problems. See, to gain access to the architecture underneath, step number 1. strategy and authority. Otherwise, you don't even have a shot at it. See, most people think when they learn human design and they learn about strategy and authority, let's say you're a generator. Your assumption is that your sacral center, because it's called your authority, that your sacral center is actually making a decision. Doesn't work that way. Looks that way. It looks like it's the authority because it is the expression on the surface. But you see, if you're operating according to your strategy and authority as a generator, what that sacral center is tapping into is what's underneath. What's underneath. And if you're operating correctly, the frequency is correct. It's being captured correctly. And that means that you're getting advantage, you're getting complete advantage of that cognition. It's the smell and your ability to smell that's actually guiding your sacral. See, what happens to human beings who do not operate correctly, that don't follow their strategy and authority, they cut themselves off from their unique cognition. I'm a great fan of the second tone. I'm a great fan of the two, Because for me, it's something that's very cool. And what's so cool about it is that it's ready for what doesn't exist. And I think that's rather spectacular. See, the whole thing about the one and the two, the whole thing about the spleen is the one is really good at recognizing things, building its defense mechanism, keeping the memory of it, and protecting the vehicle. That's what it's good at. But it's not good at things it doesn't understand or doesn't know or has never dealt with before. An immune system can fall apart instantaneously if something totally unusual arrives. Plagues have done that over and over again. This is the history of them. So we have something else in this mechanism. We have the two, and in the architecture, it's so beautiful. It's the ability to have the sensitivity to be ready to recognize something new the moment it emerges. Quite a thing when you think about it. It's quite a thing. These are mouth breathers, by the way. Very different way that they take information in. And when you finish the left and you get to the ajna center and you get to the three, well, you really get to the epitome of what it is to be strategic. That is, this is the strategic outer vision. This is the outer vision, the binocular vision, looks at the world, focuses on things, creates its dimensional environment, establishes its strategy, and controls it. This is the birth of the not-self mind. This is where the not-self mind comes from. The not-self mind rose out of the seven-centered being. It rose out of the seven-centered being's ability to assume that because they can see and focus and control and create the whole thing and strategize, they're number one. And their mind is doing it, and so their mind starts telling them what to do. You see that, you go over there, you get that, you tell that person to go there, and then you all come together and you get that. The seven-centered way. It's all there in the tonal architecture. But you see, we're not just that. Not only are we not just that, all of us at one level or another are mixes of all of this. This is what makes us so unusual. We're not just this or that. What's coming in the future is just going to be right. Just as what we leave behind was left, but not us. We're in transition. We are left and right. We are, it's what makes us so interesting. It's what gives us this incredible opportunity because we have the ability to be able to see it, to grasp it. And more than that, what mechanics always does. The moment you understand something is the moment that you can work with it, take advantage of it, that you don't have to be a victim. This is not what we are about. Only the seven-centered strategic way of life was based on winners and losers. It's not what we are about. We're not here to be concerned with our survival. Strategy and authority guarantees what is correct for you in terms of what survival is for you. You will not have to, concern yourself. It's not what we're about. It isn't. It takes a lot to get rid of that fear because that fear is so deeply embedded. And that you can see that the way in which the strategic mind operates is that the strategic mind itself establishes the way in which all the propaganda on the planet works. Think about the way in which children are raised. Think about the way in which they are told to go out and do something with their life. Think about how their minds are trained in schools. Think about all those children who are right-minded, who cannot live up to those standards, who constantly feel insecure while at the same time having so much potential depth. There are vast, vast intellectual tragedies at work on this plane because of ignorance. You know, the great revolution that is in human design through primary health system, through rave psychology, is the understanding of tone. I mean, this is what brings to light all of the dilemmas that are there, and at the same time give you a differentiated, individuated map so that you can have the correct transformation, that you can have the signposts you need. I love signposts. You know, a signpost is that you're in a process and, you know, you need something that tells you you're doing okay, you know? I mean, when you begin to understand what is there in you in terms of what's possible for you in transformation, and when you experience it yourself, this is an extraordinary awakening. Because this is what this process is about. After all, human design is about your experiment, not mine. You know, it's about what you do in this process. And it's whether or not the liberation of what is there underneath is going to be able to guide you. You see, when I talk to people about the promise of awareness, you know, every human being, according to what I see, every human being has the potential to be aware. Every human being. But, you know, in order to be able to get to that place of awareness, you have to have access to the cognition underneath. You have to have full access to your own cognitive potential. You know, not the intelligence that's imposed on you by the homogenized world that tells you what to think and how to think and when to think it. This is something quite different. This is about discovering what is your unique methodology, your unique frame in that sense for awareness. When we move over to the right side, the mutation, as I told you, takes place in the ajna center. And so you can see this transition in the movement from the third tone to the fourth tone. You have this movement where you go from the outer vision of the third tone, this focused outer vision, to the inner vision of the four. And here we begin the transformation of the process. The fact is, if we go back to the last fully right beings, these were Neanderthals, they were purely splenic, purely splenic. And when we look at the last fully left beings, they were entirely ajna. In other words, the seven-centered, ajna-dominated, mind-dominated being. When we look to the future is the solar plex. So the one thing that you're seeing in this mutation that is taking place, that is this mutation of in the ajna where the four becomes this breathing in and inner meditation and inner vision, is that the ajna center is no longer going to be the place in which the organization and the conceptualizing of the process of life, of existence, is ultimately going to take place. This is a very different mind. It's, you know, I have many students who are right-minded. And we are having an extraordinary journey together in this process. I mean, last year at the Abyss event, for the first time, I separated 2 days where I had one day with only people who were left and the next day only people that were right. As a teacher, it was an unbelievable experience. The classroom that was filled with everybody that was left, you could see the energy, you could feel the energy. Like in most situations as a teacher, you notice when people are tuning in, you notice when they're sort of tuned out. You get that with a strategic crowd. They get hooked by certain things, and you can see them focus on those things and get lost, and they basically don't pay any attention to the rest of what you're saying. But they have a certain energy and an intentness. The left audience, the left classroom, they're leaning forward. They are literally leaning into what's about to come. They're waiting, in that sense, for their focus. They're looking for their focus. And then the next day, going into the right environment, like day and night, there was nothing but a kind of emptiness. It was the stillest, quietest frequency, and there was a lot of people. There was maybe, 40, 50 in the room. It was almost like talking to the ocean. I don't mean to be so poetic, but it's what it felt like. Totally different frequency. It's not just simply my perception, because there were a couple of other people who experienced both environments, and it was really remarkable, because this is a totally different process. This is what the ride is bringing us. Not only what it's bringing us, but it's bringing us new sensory capacity. It's this new sensory capacity that's really something. Think about this inner vision. Think about it this way. Imagine that you have this inner vision and somebody is coming towards you. Close your eyes for a moment. Don't look at them. You don't have to keep it for long. Just close your eyes for a moment. You're going to take in every piece of information that you need to take in about them. You just will. You just take it all in. There's a difference with these beings. They have very different sensory gifts. By the time you get to the solar plex, and the solar plex is where all of this is going to emerge, all of this new mutation, the new awareness, all of this neural activity that's down there is leading somewhere. And you get to capacities that have to do with sensory attunement to frequencies in the environment that the left has never known. It's never known. Frequencies relative to the auric field, to the electromagnetic field, to the tactile field. The ability to take in extraordinary levels of information from sensory capacities that up until now have been sort of science fiction-like. And I don't want to get into any kind of thing about that. It's just that there are, within the context of tone, there are 7 senses. It all falls under the super embrace of what's listed in this diagram as sound, as frequency itself. We're frequency beings. This is where the frequency architecture is. And everything about us, everything that we call cognition, is our ability to interpret frequency and the tools that we use to interpret frequency. And the tools that we use to interpret frequency are there in the architecture of tone. Do you interpret the frequency with your nose, with your mouth, with your eyes, with your whole body, with your touch? See, every single human being has a deeply, deeply unique way in which they embrace cognitively the experience of being here in the world. We each have a specific gift, a gift that's there in the tonal architecture that provides us with a sensory capacity that enhances our ability to be able to, be aware on this plane and live out the full potential of what we are as beings. You cannot do that without it. It is all there, down there in the tonal architecture. And because it is in the tonal architecture that we are defined either to our leftness or our rightness, it means that it is the tonal architecture and the way in which it conditions each of the steps of transformation that are really the key to aligning your body to its original architecture. The place where you see that the most profoundly is in primary health system. That is in PHS relative to the tones of the sun-earth, the designed sun-earth. You're looking at brain and brain development. You're looking at dietary regimen. And the dietary regimen for that particular brain development is going to be rooted in the tonal influence. And it is not just simply the tonal influence that is going to dictate the general parameters of the dietary regimen, but it's also going to specifically align that dietary regimen to the enhancement of one particular sense, the one that's right for you, the one that is natural for you. See, these forms are perfect in the plans. You know, they're always you always get these wonderful architectural plans, and then, you know, you put the demo out there and the damn thing falls apart, you know, all of those things, you know, what life is like. The plans are terrific. They're terrific. They're beautiful. Nothing more beautiful for me as a mechanic than tonal architecture. I mean, you know, this is the holy grail of mechanics. This is absolutely gorgeous. It's also very sad. You know, it carries with it the other side of the coin. You look at the architecture and you say, why not? You know, why can't we have this? Why can't we just live out the perfection that is there? Why can't the information that's in the tone get all the way over to the line? Why not? And of course the answer remains the same. You know, this is what the homogenized being is. The homogenized being is somebody that is caught, you know, in a trap that alienates it, that takes it away, literally takes it away from its cognitive potential. It takes it away from the very, very intelligence that not simply defines its own being, but the very intelligence that would ensure not simply its survival, but its ability to flourish on this plane. We are very, very, very bright creatures. I mean, that is something to understand. It is something to grasp. You know, we have an enormous potential. We are designed to be intelligent. We're designed for look at us. Look at our world. Look at our tools. Look at the way in which all of these things work. The internet, the this, the that, the da. You know, they're giving out Nobels now. Jesus, human beings. We don't lack for intelligence. We lack awareness. Awareness. This comes out of the cognitive depth that is there in the tonal architecture. This is where it is. It's the only place. And it's about our responsibility of being able to go in there and make sure we get what is correct for us and live it. And it's all done on the surface. Everything is done on the surface. That's the joke, eh? Here I am with you in Wonderland, eh? You know, it's a kind of magical mystery tour. We go down into Jules Verne's center of the earth, and here we are in the center of the crystal, and we see this fantastic architecture, and everyone can be a king and a queen. You know, everyone is perfect. Everyone is beautiful. Everyone is wonderful. Not only that, everyone is carrying that perfection in their body. This isn't on a graph, you know. It's engraved inside the crystal, and it's in you. I mean, it's not like the architecture somewhere else. This is what's so sad. It's in you, and it's covered in, you know, a lifetime of homogenized gunk, the veils, you know, more and more, until it's lost forever, till you no longer even have a sense that it's there. It's sad out there in the world. I feel so bad for all of these babies coming into the world who are right. There are not enough human beings in the world yet to understand this enormous change in understanding the way in which mind, as an example, operates. These children that are coming into the world, these right children, you know, there is nobody there to protect them from the deep insecurities and discomfort that is going to be there, that is going to impact their process in life. Of all the things that have emerged out of tone, this understanding of the change of mind, rave psychology, in the way in which it is constructed today, has an understanding of the mechanics of the way in which the mind operates that is absolutely revolutionary in what it reveals and how beneficial it can be. Obviously, to be able to find out about the nature of the way in which your architecture has laid out the possibilities for you, and to be able to work with that. You know, I refer quite often to it, but in fact, this is what the Center for Human Differentiation is all about. The PHS and Rave Psychology programs, the people who go through those programs, basically what they're trained to do is to be able to, you know, help people align themselves to these various aspects of their nature, to be able to see what they are, to be able to come to grips with what the signposts are, to be able to find their way in that sense to what is correct for them, and to get rid of the burdens. You know, I've been doing this so long, over 2 decades, and I think that one of the things that has been the most rewarding for me is how much weight has been taken off the shoulder of those that have embraced this knowledge. How much lighter people are in that sense because of the knowledge. What it means to operate correctly in this life. What it means to get away from your mind taking control of your life. And it's not just about the obvious that I teach over and over again and that I've been emphasizing to you. It's now here in a way you can see that deep underneath all of this strategy and authority, what this is doing is that it's nurturing such a profound wonder of what it is or what it can be or what it possibly could be to be you. I mean, to be you. What is the point of living a life in a shell? You know, if you don't get the opportunity in this life to really tap into what you are here for. You know, the serendipity of your existence. You know, there is worth in that. There is extraordinary beauty in that because we are designed to differentiate. We are designed to have the potential to be different. And in that, to be able to, in fact, finally learn how to live on this plane. I know history really well. And history is just blood, suffering, short lives, misery. That's really history. It's really what it's been. Untold misery, century after century after century. Oh, don't be fooled by the histories of the elite, you know. That's not what life is. The masses, the world, us, all of us. What it's been like for so long. For so long. How incompetent we have been in being able to live this life with grace. How many attempts there have been this way and that way, how many philosophies, how many religions, how many prophets, how many messiahs. The world is uglier today than it has ever been in its entire history. It is no better off for all those philosophies, all those religions, all the platitudes. It isn't. It is deeply, deeply, deeply unaware, deeply disconnected from the possibility of what is there for them as beings. You see, you're on the other side. You're here. We're here together. Don't miss the point. Really, don't miss the point. Don't wait for others to stand with you, to go along with you. You have to take a stand. I mean, this is the only way that it's ever going to work. It's going to work because you take a stand. That you're ready to find out what is really there. That you're ready to embrace it. You have to do this alone. I mean, this is a journey. You know, there's 2 things about this knowledge. I'm very aware of them. You know, on one level is the general panacea, that is that the basic tenets of strategy and authority, if taken into any degree, is going to make life a little bit better for people. There's no question about it. And for most human beings, that's it. And that will be it. But that's not what this is. We've been given a map to the whole thing. The individuated map of a human being to a degree that is just really, in a way, beyond imagination. And along with that, all of the various ways, all of the various possibilities that are there for that being, and the techniques to be able to help them to achieve those things. But you see, this is an antisocial process. This is a very selfish process. I joke, I call it enlightened selfishness. It's kind of cute, no? Enlightened selfishness. But it's what it's about. It's not about that you cannot love the other, care for the other, be with the other, all that stuff. It's never about that. It's about you. You. It has to be about your authority. It has to be about the integrity of the way in which you live your life according to what is correct for you, no matter what. It does not matter if they all cry that the sky is falling. If your sacral says no, go for a walk. Don't be concerned. It's about you. I mean, all of this knowledge, I've been at it for what? This is the 11th one, teasing you every one of these hours with all this interesting stuff, and it's this and it's that. I know. But it's all about the surface. It's only about the surface. If you can't live this, then you miss the point. Because yes, it's interesting. And yes, as you live it, it becomes more valuable to you. It's no longer just an intellectual exercise of looking at the way in which something can be deconstructed, but it becomes your life. It becomes a part of you. And your awareness begins to grow. Interesting thing about the 3-year programs that I did in rave psychology and PHS, a common phenomenon amongst all of those beings who went through that process. The byproduct of all of that was awareness. Their whole awareness changed over the course of those 3 years that we worked together. Their awareness changed because the way in which they operated, the way in which they could see the mechanics of their own being, the understanding of the way in which things work, transformed the way in which they looked at the world. And for all of them, that was the thing that was so remarkable, was that this is automatically what arises out of the process. And this is what we're for. This is what the beauty of tone is all about. In so many ways, it's just simply there to remind you what we're here for. We're here to be the pure expression of our unique cognitive potential. That's what we're here for. That's what I'm here for. Well, tomorrow we'll take a look at the messenger, color. Until then, bye for now.